I adjusted the shoulders of my blouse before getting out of the car. My small gray sedan, which I'd been driving for 7 years, looked out of place among the shiny SUVs and sports cars in the driveway of my son's house. I grabbed the box of apple pie I'd baked that morning from the passenger seat. I wasn't sure if Portia would appreciate my culinary talents, but it wasn't my policy to come empty-handed. Larkin and Portia's house was in Shaker Heights, one of Cleveland's most prestigious neighborhoods. The two-story colonial-style building, with its immaculately manicured lawn and ornamental shrubs, looked like something out of the pages of an interior design magazine. I thought of my cozy apartment in the more modest Lakewood neighborhood, 3 rooms, a small balcony overlooking the park, and no ostentatious luxury. The front door opened before I even pressed the bell. Larkin, my only son, stood on the doorstep with a warm smile. "Mom, you're as accurate as ever." He leaned over to give me a hug. He smelled of expensive cologne. "Is it possible to be late to visit your own son?" I smiled, holding out the box of pie. "Apple, your favorite." Larkin accepted the gift with apparent pleasure. He looked like a successful young professional in his 32 years tight, with a neat haircut and an expensive shirt that probably cost as much as I spent on clothes in a month. "Portia's in the kitchen finishing up dinner," he said as he led me into the spacious living room. The interior of the room was a cool gray-blue color with minimalist furniture and a few abstract paintings on the walls. Not a single photograph, not a single personal item, as if it were a showroom rather than a living space. "Have a seat, Mom. Would you like some wine?" "Water would be better," I replied, settling on the edge of the spotless white couch. "I have to drive." Larkin nodded and headed for the bar in the corner of the room. I watched my son carefully. His movements had become more subdued, as if he were in a client's office rather than his own home. I'd noticed this change since his marriage to Portia 3 years ago. From the kitchen came the sound of the dishwasher running and the clatter of heels on the marble floor. A moment later, Portia Gallagher Vandermeer appeared in the doorway, slender, with impeccable posture and a cold look in her brown eyes. Her dark hair was gathered in a tight bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. "Good evening, Roxy," she said with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I hope the journey wasn't tedious." "Hello, Portia. It's only 20 minutes away, so it wasn't tiring," I replied, rising to hug my sister-in-law. Portia discreetly allowed herself to be hugged, but did not respond to the embrace. I felt the tension in her shoulders. "I brought apple pie," I said, pulling back. "How nice." Portia cast a quick glance at the box in her husband's hands. "But we already have dessert. Chocolate ganache from that French pastry chef downtown." I noticed Larkin wrinkle his nose slightly. He always preferred simple homemade pastries to gourmet desserts. "We can save the pie for breakfast," he suggested, setting the box on the coffee table. Portia pressed her lips together but remained silent. Instead, she turned to me. "Larkin, pour Mom something. I have to check on the risotto." After she left, the air in the room seemed to lighten. Larkin came back with a glass of water and sat down next to me. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly. "Portia's had a rough week at work." "It's okay." I squeezed his hand gently. "How are you doing? Is the cybersecurity project going well?" My son perked up, talking about the new data security system his team was implementing for a large bank. I listened attentively, asking clarifying questions. In my years as a financial controller, I was used to understanding complex systems and processes. After my husband died when Larkin was only 15, I had to be the sole breadwinner in the family and learned many skills quickly. In the midst of our conversation, Portia's cell phone rang. Her voice came from the kitchen, sharp, tense. "This isn't a good time, Ashley. What do you mean the board didn't approve? We submitted all the calculations." Larkin got up, apologized, and went out to see if everything was okay. I was alone in the living room, listening to the conversation coming from the kitchen. "We can't afford to lose this contract." Portia's voice sounded almost desperate. "If Syntax Solutions doesn't get new funding by the end of the quarter, we'll all be out on the street." A pause. Then even more irritated. "Of course I didn't tell Larkin about this. He doesn't need to know how bad it is. His mother already thinks he made a mistake marrying me." I frowned. I'd never said anything like that to Larkin or anyone else. Yes, Portia wasn't the daughter-in-law I dreamed of for my son, but I'd always tried to be polite and supportive. Well, we'll talk tomorrow. I have dinner with my mother-in-law. Portia said the last word with such disdain that I cringed. I heard footsteps and quickly picked up a glossy magazine from the coffee table, pretending to study it. Portia entered the living room with a strained smile. Dinner will be ready in 5 minutes. Larkin is opening the wine. It's wonderful, I replied. It smells delicious. It's risotto with portobello mushrooms and truffle oil, she said as if I was supposed to be impressed. The recipe is from the chef at the restaurant where we celebrated our anniversary. Sounds exquisite, I smiled. Larkin had always loved simple dishes when he was a kid. Macaroni and cheese was his favorite. Portia frowned slightly. Yes, he mentioned it. Fortunately, I was able to develop his taste. He now discerns good cuisine. Her words sounded like an accusation, as if I'd been feeding my son substandard food all these years. I swallowed the sharp reply, reminding myself that I'd come here for Larkin. Dinner was in the dining room, at a long glass table that looked too fragile for everyday use. Portia arranged the risotto on plates, garnishing each portion with microgreens and some colored blobs of sauce. It looks like a work of art, I praised sincerely. Good food is as much about aesthetics as it is about flavor, Portia replied, filling glasses with wine. Larkin looked tense, as if preparing for a possible conflict. I decided to keep the conversation casual. How is your bathroom remodeling coming along? I asked, remembering that Larkin had mentioned it during our last telephone conversation. We've abandoned the original idea, my son replied. We decided to do a complete remodel with Italian tile and Japanese fixtures. The budget tripled, Portia added proudly, as if it were an achievement. But you can't skimp on quality. I nodded, thinking of my modest bathroom, which I had renovated 2 years ago, carefully selecting discounted materials and doing some of the work myself. Of course, if funds allow, unlike some, we are not afraid to invest in the future. Portia sipped her wine. Life is too short to skimp on comfort. Larkin changed the subject. Mother, how is your consulting practice? Any new clients? Yes, how's your, business? Portia said with barely concealed skepticism. I felt a prick of irritation, but kept my expression calm. It's going well. I recently signed 2 new small businesses. I'm helping them build a financial strategy. Portia looked surprised. You actually do financial counseling? I thought it was more like, informal savings advice. Mom has a degree in finance and 20 years of experience as a comptroller, Larkin interjected with a touch of pride. Really? Portia looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. Larkin never mentioned it. I always thought you were a housewife. I started working after my husband died, I answered calmly. Someone had to pay the bills and support Larkin. Ah, so it was a necessity. Portia nodded understandingly. That would explain your conservative approach to money. I noticed her glance at my simple blouse and slightly worn cardigan. Financial prudence is never a bad thing, I replied, spooning a spoonful of risotto into my mouth, especially in uncertain times. What an outdated viewpoint, Portia laughed. In today's world, success comes to those who take risks and act boldly. Take our company, Syntax Solutions, for example. We're growing rapidly because we're not afraid to go for broke. I remembered the overheard phone conversation, but I kept silent. If the company really was on the verge of collapse, Portia's self-assurance seemed even more inappropriate. Speaking of fashion, Portia continued, changing the subject. Roxy, I've been meaning to say for a while, those floral blouses and cardigans you're wearing, they make you look old. You're only 56 and you look 70. Larkin choked on his wine. Portia, please. What? I'm just trying to help. Your mother could look a lot more modern. It's a matter of self-respect. I calmly put down my fork. Thank you for your concern, Portia, but I prefer comfortable clothes. At my age and lifestyle, it's more practical. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Portia splashed her hands. At my age, more practical? You're putting yourself in the frame of an old woman. No wonder you live so modestly. You just don't know how to enjoy life. Larkin looked increasingly discomfited, but didn't dare to stop his wife. Portia thinks it's important to look good for work, he murmured, trying to smooth things over. Not just for work, she objected. For yourself, Roxy, when was the last time you went to a spa? Had a good manicure, buy designer clothes? I recently got a haircut, I replied with a slight smile. And designer clothes, frankly, aren't high on my list of priorities. Portia rolled her eyes. That's why you don't have a man after all these years of widowhood. You've stopped looking after yourself. Portia! Larkin finally raised his voice. This is too much. I put my hand on my son's shoulder. It's all right, Larkin. Everyone has their own priorities. Portia values looks and status. I value financial independence and peace of mind. What good is independence if you don't enjoy life? Portia snorted. What good are designer things if you have to worry about tomorrow? I parried softly. The rest of dinner passed in tense silence. The dessert, an exquisite chocolate ganache, was really great but too sweet for my taste. I complimented it, eliciting an indulgent smile from Portia. It's one of the best desserts in town, she said. Worth the money. As I was about to leave, Larkin walked me to my car. I'm sorry about tonight, Mom, he said quietly. Portia didn't mean to hurt you. She's just straightforward. Don't apologize, I stroked his cheek. It's okay. The important thing is that you're happy. He nodded uncertainly, and the movement told me more than any words could. On the way home, I pondered Portia's strange behavior. Her aggressiveness seemed excessive, even by her standards. Something was definitely going on at Syntax Solutions, and it bothered her greatly. Parking outside my house, I pulled out my phone and found the number for Jonah Baxter, my former colleague who was now in private equity and consulting. If anyone could tell me about the state of affairs at Syntax Solutions, it was him. Jonah, it's Roxy Vandermeer. I'm sorry to call you so late, but I need your help. What do you know about a company called Syntax Solutions? The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My conversation with Jonah last night had left me with a lot of questions and one important answer. Syntax Solutions was indeed on the verge of financial collapse. Roxy, this company is a sinking ship, Jonah said in his characteristic low voice. They lost a key client 3 months ago. The stock is plummeting. Investors are panicking. I hear they're looking for a white knight, an emergency investor, to inject fresh capital. I sat in the kitchen, stirring my morning coffee and going over the notes I'd taken during the conversation. Jonah had promised to send me more details today. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, the email arrived. Jonah was always known for his punctuality, one of the reasons we had worked well together during my career at Midwest Finance. I opened the attached files and immersed myself in the numbers. Syntax Solutions was founded 5 years ago and specialized in data analytics software. Their flagship product, the Syntax Pro Analytics platform, had won several industry awards for its innovative approach. But after the departure of their largest customer, pharmaceutical company Biomedica, their financial situation had deteriorated dramatically. I called Jonah. I need to meet you in person, I said as soon as he answered. I have an idea, but I want to discuss it in detail. I'm intrigued, I could hear the smile in his voice. 1 o'clock at the Blue Lotus? I'll be there. The Blue Lotus was a small cafe in downtown Cleveland, secluded enough for confidential conversations. I chose a table in the far corner and ordered a green tea. Jonah showed up at exactly 1 o'clock, impeccably dressed as always, in a dark gray suit. Roxy Vandermeer, he shook my hand warmly. You still look like you could blow any financial report to atoms. I smiled. Jonah was one of the few people who always valued my professionalism over looks or status. And you still wear those awful ties, I parried, nodding at his bright blue, finely patterned tie. He laughed and sat down across from me. So, what are you so interested in Syntax Solutions? Don't tell me you're planning to invest. I raised an eyebrow in silence. Roxy, no. He leaned closer. It's a risky venture. They might not survive. They might survive. I opened my tablet and showed him the spreadsheet I'd made this morning. Look, their technological developments are at least 2 years ahead of the competition. The problem is not the product, but management and marketing. Agreed, but, I analyzed their patent portfolio, I continued. Licensing agreements for their algorithms alone can bring stable income if you organize the process correctly. Jonah rubbed his chin thoughtfully. You really dug deep. But why this particular company? There are dozens of more stable options for investment. I sipped my tea, choosing my words. My sister-in-law, Portia, works there. She runs the research department. Ah, Jonah said understandingly. Family business. That makes sense. Not really, I shook my head. Let's just say that our relationship with Portia is complicated. Complicated. But that's not the point. I saw potential that others were missing. And you plan to become that white knight? Maybe. I showed him another file on my tablet. Look at their latest investor report. They put the value of the controlling interest at about $2 million. Jonah whistled. That's a lot of money. Do you have that kind of money? After selling the country house and taking into account my investments over the last 10 years, yes. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with an attentive gaze. Roxy, I've known you for 20 years. You've never been an impulsive investor. What's really going on? I sighed. Yesterday, I was at my son and daughter-in-law's dinner. Portia, she thinks I'm a failure. An old woman who doesn't know how to live. She doesn't know my financial situation or my professional history. And you want to rub her nose in it? Jonah nodded understandingly. But $2 million is too high a price to pay for a moment's satisfaction. It's not just that, I argued. I do see potential in the company. And the fact that I'll be able to shake up Portia a little is just a nice bonus. Jonah laughed. You haven't changed, Roxy. Always finding a way to combine business with pleasure. So you're going to help me with this deal? He tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. On one condition, I'll do my own due diligence on the company over the next 2 days. If I find anything seriously troubling, you drop the idea. Deal? Deal! I extended my hand, and we sealed the agreement with a handshake. While Jonah was busy checking in, I decided to watch Syntax Solutions from the other side. The next morning, I parked not far from their office, a modern glass building in a technology park on the outskirts of Cleveland. I knew Portia usually arrived at work by 8:30. At 8:25, her silver Audi pulled into the parking lot. Portia got out of the car, elegant, wearing a dark blue suit and a leather shoulder bag. But even from a distance, I could see the tension in her gait. She was almost running toward the entrance, not even stopping to answer the guard's greeting. I waited another half hour, watching the employees arriving for work. Most looked young, probably recent graduates. No one lingered in the parking lot for conversation or coffee. Everyone rushed inside with concerned faces, not a good sign for corporate culture. That evening, Jonah called me. I finished the audit, he said. There's good news and bad news. Start with the bad, I asked, settling into my chair. Their financial situation is even worse than we thought. Without urgent investments, they're 6 to 8 weeks away from bankruptcy. There are also management problems. The CEO seems more concerned with his image than with the company. And the good ones? Their technology is really impressive, and the patent portfolio is worth even more than we realized. With the right management, the company can not just survive, but become a leader in its niche. So, green light? I asked. Yellow, Jonah replied. The risk is high, but if you are ready to actively participate in management, not just invest money and wait, there is a chance. I smiled. You know, I've never been a passive investor. Then let's get started. I could hear the excitement in his voice. I've already contacted their CFO. They're desperately looking for an investor and are ready to meet tomorrow. The next day, I met with the management of Syntax Solutions, the CEO, Harrison Price, and the CFO, Ashley Donovan. Price was exactly as Jonah had described him, assertive, with a perfect smile and the empty eyes of a man used to talking more than doing. Ashley, on the other hand, gave the impression of a competent professional cornered by circumstances. Mrs. Vandermeer, Price began, after an exchange of pleasantries, I must admit that your offer came as a pleasant surprise. We had not expected interest from an individual investor of such a caliber. His gaze slid over my modest suit, and I could almost hear him thinking, where did that woman get that kind of money? I prefer to invest in technology with potential, not designer clothes, Mr. Price, I said with a slight smile. And your analytics platform definitely has potential. Ashley visibly relaxed after those words. We've prepared a presentation of our latest developments, she said, opening her laptop. Before we get into the technical details, I interrupted, let's get the terms straight. I'm willing to invest $2 million in exchange for a 51% stake in the company. 51%? Price straightened up. We were counting on a minority investor. 49% is the maximum we can offer. In that case, I wish you luck in finding another investor. I began to gather my papers. You have less than 2 months before your working capital is completely depleted, as I understand it. Price turned pale, and Ashley threw him a warning glance. Perhaps we could find a compromise, she said cautiously. 51%, but with the current management team remaining in place for, say, 6 months? 3 months, I replied. And I want full access to all financial and operational data from the moment the agreement is signed. After 2 hours of intense negotiations, we reached an agreement. I would receive 51% of the stock, the chairmanship of the board of directors, and the right to appoint a CFO in 3 months. Price retained the CEO position, but with a probationary period. When we were done, Ashley walked me to the exit. Thank you, she said quietly. The company deserves a second chance. We have really innovative technology. I know, I said. I wouldn't have invested otherwise. May I ask, she paused, why our company? There are a lot of promising startups in the technology sector right now. I smiled. Let's just say I have a personal interest in the success of Syntax Solutions. At that moment, I noticed Portia coming out of the conference room at the end of the hallway. She was engrossed in a conversation with a coworker and didn't notice me. I quickly said goodbye to Ashley and headed for the exit, not wanting to meet my sister-in-law prematurely. As I drove home, my phone kept ringing. Lawyers, financial advisors, even a reporter from the local business newspaper who had somehow gotten wind of the deal. By evening, all formalities were settled, and I officially became the owner of the controlling stake in Syntax Solutions. That same evening, Larkin called. Mom, would you like to have dinner with us on Saturday? He asked. Portia insisted. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Portia had never insisted on my presence before. I would love to, I replied. Is something wrong? I don't know. I could hear the bewilderment in my son's voice. She said she had good news from work. Some investor saved the company from bankruptcy. She's very excited. I can imagine, I said, holding back a smile. What time should I get there? 7 o'clock tonight. Mom? Yeah? Thank you for being so patient with Portia. I know she can be, complicated. It's okay, Larkin, I said softly. Family is family. After the conversation, I sat on the couch, thinking about the upcoming dinner. Portia obviously didn't know who the new owner of the company was yet. The management had decided to first reassure the employees with the news of the life-saving investment, and the details were to be announced at the general meeting on Monday. I didn't plan to stage a dramatic reveal. Initially, I did see a good investment opportunity, and the desire to teach my arrogant sister-in-law a lesson was secondary. But now that the deal was done, I couldn't help but anticipate the moment of truth. Jonah called late in the afternoon. Congratulations, Madam Chairman, he said with a touch of irony. How does it feel to own a technology company? I haven't fully realized it yet, I admitted. It all happened so fast. Fast is an understatement. I've never seen a deal of this magnitude closed in 3 days. In critical situations, bureaucracy takes a back seat, I said. By the way, you didn't tell me that Ashley Donovan was the same Ashley Portia was talking to during our dinner. I hadn't noticed the connection, Jonah said quietly. So your sister-in-law still doesn't know? She'll find out on Saturday, I sighed. Larkin invited me to dinner. Portia wants to celebrate the rescue of the company. Oh, it'll be an interesting evening, Jonah laughed. I wish I had been invited. Believe me, you wouldn't want to be there. I imagined Portia's reaction and cringed. But I have to tell her in person before she finds out from her colleagues on Monday. Good luck, Jonah wished me sincerely. And Roxy, don't savor the moment too much. Remember that she is your son's wife after all. I know, I replied. I'll try to be diplomatic. I spent the next 2 days immersed in Syntax Solutions. Ashley sent me tons of documents, reports, and presentations. The more I studied the company, the more I was convinced that I had made the right decision. With proper management, the business could be very successful indeed. On Saturday night, I carefully chose my outfit for dinner. Usually I didn't pay much attention to clothes, but tonight was a special occasion. In the end, I settled on an elegant navy blue suit that I had bought for important client meetings. Quite conservative, but impeccably cut and made of quality fabric. On the way to my son's house, I mentally rehearsed my conversation with Portia. I didn't want triumph or revenge, just mutual respect. But I also realized that Portia's pride would be seriously hurt, and I prepared for a violent reaction. As I parked in front of their house, I noticed that Portia's car was in the driveway, which meant she was home, not working late as she usually did on Saturdays. I took a deep breath, grabbed the bottle of champagne I'd brought for the celebration, and headed for the front door. It was going to be an interesting evening. Larkin opened the door before I could ring the bell, his face lit up with genuine joy. Mom! He gave me a big hug. I'm glad you could make it. How could I miss a family dinner? I smiled as I handed him a bottle of champagne. To celebrate, I understand. Oh, yes. Larkin took the bottle, examining the label. Veuve Clicquot? Wow, Mother, you're generous. A special occasion calls for a special champagne, I replied, walking into the living room. The interior of the house looked even more immaculate than last time. Not a speck of dust, not a single thing out of place. I wondered how much time and effort Portia put into maintaining that perfect order. Portia's still changing, Larkin said, setting the bottle on the bar. She got a temporary promotion to Deputy Director of Research today. Not exactly what she'd hoped for, but still a good sign, especially after all the problems in the company. Congratulations, I said, feeling slightly guilty. I knew this promotion was just a way to keep key employees on board until the new investor came on board. She must be very pleased. I'll say, Larkin smiled broadly. I haven't seen her so enthusiastic in a long time. You know, the last few months have been very difficult for her. The constant stress, the uncertainty. I can imagine. I nodded, thinking about the Syntax Solutions financials I'd been studying for the past 2 days. She didn't show it, but I know she was afraid of losing her job, Larkin continued, lowering his voice. And with our mortgage and loans. He stopped talking when he heard the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Portia was coming down, dressed in an elegant black dress with emerald earrings that I was sure cost at least a month's salary for a Syntax Solutions employee. Roxy. She gave me a smile, almost genuine this time. Thank you for coming to our little celebration. I stepped up to meet her. Congratulations on your promotion, Portia. Larkin tells me you have good news. Oh, it's just the beginning. She waved her hand with the look of someone confident of her bright future. Some big investor has bought the company. The details will be announced on Monday, but I've already been promoted. I think the new management appreciated my contribution. I held back a smile. I'm sure you deserve it. Absolutely, she nodded. I practically single-handedly pulled off the last research project. Without me, the company would have collapsed long ago. Larkin served us aperitif glasses of white wine. To Portia's success, he toasted. We clinked glasses, and I noticed that my sister-in-law took a big sip, as if she needed to calm her nerves. Dinner is almost ready, she said. I made roast veal with truffle sauce. Larkin, please check the oven. My son obediently went to the kitchen, leaving us alone. So, Portia sat down on the edge of the couch, crossing her legs elegantly. How are you doing, Roxy? Still consulting with those small firms? Yes, I answered calmly. Business is good. Got some new clients. That's great. She smiled indulgently. You know, I always thought it was important to stay active at our age. At least you're not sitting at home staring at the TV like a lot of people. In your position, I suppressed a sigh. Even in her supposed triumph, Portia couldn't resist making condescending comments. In my position? I interjected. Well, you know, she made a vague gesture with her hand. A woman of age, living alone without a serious career. What do you consider a serious career, Portia? She straightened up, clearly pleased with the opportunity to talk about herself. A real career is when you hold a key position in a significant company. When your decisions affect the business, the people, the market. That's what I'm doing at Syntax Solutions. We're creating the future of data analytics. That sounds impressive, I nodded. It is. She perked up even more. You know, a lot of men in our industry still think that a woman can't be a true leader in technology. But I'm proving otherwise every day. And the new investor? I asked cautiously. Do you know anything about him? Portia wrinkled her nose. Not yet, no, just rumors. They say he's some Wall Street financier. I hope he understands the value of innovation and won't just squeeze money out of the company. Larkin's back from the kitchen. Dinner's ready. We can sit at the table. We moved into the dining room where a table was set with expensive china and crystal. I noticed that Portia had taken out her best set, not the one I'd used on my last visit. It looks great, I complimented as Larkin placed the roast on the plates. It's a recipe from the chef at Le Bernardin, Portia said. I was there for a conference last year. It's hard to make, but for special occasions it's worth the effort. The food was indeed superb. Tender veal in an exquisite sauce, perfectly cooked vegetables. I sincerely praised my sister-in-law's culinary talents. Oh, it's nothing, she dismissed it, but I could see that she was pleased with the praise. When you have good taste, it's natural to cook well. Have you ever thought about a career in cooking? I asked. You clearly have a talent for it. Portia snorted. Why would I want to be a chef when I can run a technology company? Cooking is a hobby, nothing more. Real success is measured in influence and money. Larkin looked a little embarrassed. Portia is very ambitious, he said, as if apologizing. That's one of the reasons I fell in love with her. Ambition is a good thing, I agreed, as long as it's backed up by real accomplishments. Oh, I'm fine with that. Portia reached for the bottle of red wine and filled her glass. Unlike some, I don't settle for less. I ignored the stiletto. Tell me more about your promotion. What new responsibilities will you have? Portia was clearly excited about the opportunity to brag. I'll oversee all of the company's research projects, not just my department. That means more responsibility, more influence on product strategy, and of course, a higher salary. She paused to sip her wine. I'm already thinking about a new car, maybe a Porsche or a Maserati. Larkin choked up. Honey, we said we had to take care of the mortgage first. Larkin, don't be so down to earth, she interrupted him. My promotion is just the beginning. In a year, I could be director of research and development. That's a whole other level of income. I watched this exchange of remarks, noting how Larkin was giving in to his wife's insistence. He'd always been a peacemaker, even as a child, preferring compromise to conflict. But now that trait had turned into a lack of willpower, and it worried me. What if the new leadership wanted to bring in their own team? I asked, taking a sip of wine. It happens a lot when there's a change in ownership. A shadow of worry ran across Portia's face, but she quickly pulled herself together. It's impossible. I'm indispensable to the company. All the key research projects rely on me. They'd rather fire the CEO than me. Confidence is a valuable quality, I said neutrally. It's not just confidence, Portia raised her glass. It's knowing one's worth. Something many women of your generation, Roxy, never learned. I remained calm, even though the remark was deliberately offensive. Every generation learns in its own way, I replied, and each generation makes its own mistakes. Mom was a very successful financial controller, Larkin interjected. She raised me alone and gave me a great education. Yes, I remember, Portia said, and that is certainly worthy of respect. But you have to admit, Larkin, it's not the same as having a real career in the modern world of technology. I noticed my son tense, but again he remained silent, avoiding confrontation. Portia, however, fueled by the wine and her own self-confidence, continued. You know, Roxy, when you're ready to step out of your comfort zone, I could introduce you to our new investor. He might have some sort of consulting role for someone with your experience, something part-time so you don't overwork yourself. I could barely contain my laughter. That's very, thoughtful of you, Portia. I just want to help. She shrugged with the look of someone doing a favor. After all, you are Larkin's mother. I'd like you to have a taste of real success too, even if it's in the twilight of your career. Larkin looked increasingly uncomfortable. Why don't we move on to dessert? He suggested, clearly trying to change the subject. Of course, darling, Portia rose. But as she turned toward the kitchen, she caught her wine glass with her sleeve. The glass tipped over, the dark red liquid spilling over the white tablecloth and dripping onto the floor. Shit! Portia exclaimed, looking at the spilling stain. That's my favorite Egyptian cotton tablecloth. She rushed to the kitchen and returned with paper towels, which she used to blot the tablecloth. The wine's already soaked in, she muttered irritably. Now I'll have to have it dry cleaned. I can help, I offered, standing up. No, 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 sit, Portia said. It's just. She noticed a drop of wine on the floor. Larkin, get a damp cloth from the kitchen. My son obediently went to perform the task while Portia continued to struggle unsuccessfully with the stain on the tablecloth. Her perfect evening was ruined, and I could see her irritation growing. Larkin returned with a damp cloth. Here, dear. Portia snatched the rag, but instead of tackling the floor, she continued rubbing the tablecloth, growing more and more nervous. Shit, shit, shit. It won't come off. You need to sprinkle salt on it to soak it up, I suggested. And then soak it in cold water and vinegar. Portia turned to me sharply. If I wanted advice on housekeeping, I'd ask for it. Larkin put his hand on her shoulder. Portia, Mom is just trying to help. She doesn't need help with advice, she snapped back. Let her do something useful. She threw a wet rag in my direction. The rag hit my chest and fell to my knees, leaving a wet stain on my suit. Wipe the floor, Maid, Portia blurted out. You'll do some good. There was a shocked silence. Larkin stared at his wife with his mouth open, clearly unable to believe his ears. Then, as if trying to break the unbearable tension, he chuckled nervously. Portia, what are you? He began, but stopped, not knowing how to respond to such blatant rudeness. I slowly lifted the rag from my lap, feeling everyone's eyes on me. Time seemed to slow down. I could have responded harshly. I could have gotten up and walked away. I could have made a scene. But instead, I calmly put the rag on the table and looked straight into my sister-in-law's eyes. Portia, I said quietly but firmly, I don't think you quite understand the situation. What is there to understand? She snorted, still filled with anger. You've ruined my holiday party with your advice, and yesterday I bought a controlling interest in Syntax Solutions. I interrupted her, keeping my tone calm. 51%. That makes me the majority owner and, in effect, your employer. Portia froze with her mouth open. The color slowly receded from her face. What? She whispered. Is this some kind of a joke? No, it's not a joke. I pulled a folder out of my bag and placed it on the table. Here's a copy of the agreement. You can check it out for yourself. As of Monday, I'm officially chairman of Syntax Solutions. Larkin looked stunned. Mom, how did you? He stammered, unable to formulate a question. $2 million to buy a controlling interest. I looked at my son. I'm well invested, Larkin, and I've always been frugal. Portia grabbed the folder with trembling hands and began frantically going through the documents. It's impossible, she muttered. Impossible. But the further she read, the more she realized it was true. I watched her face alternate between shock, disbelief, and finally horror. Why? She finally squeezed out. Why did you do it? Syntax Solutions is a promising company with great technology but poor management, I replied. It's a good investment. But why my company? Portia sounded desperate. Of all the technology firms? I found out about Syntax Solutions problems by chance during our last dinner, I explained. I decided to look into it and saw the potential. Believe me, it was a business decision. A business decision, she repeated in a hollow voice, slumping back in her chair. You're my boss now. Technically, yes, I nodded. Though the director of research and development will be your direct supervisor. But you can fire me. Portia looked up at me, lost in thought. At any time. I could, I agreed, but I'm not going to, at least not without a good reason. Larkin finally found his voice. Mother, why didn't you tell us? I was going to tell you today, I replied. But I planned to do it a little differently. Before she threw the rag at you and called you a maid, Larkin glanced at his wife, who sat with her head down. Yes, I confirmed. That's about right. Portia looked up slowly. What will happen now? She asked quietly. After my revelation, the table was dead silent. Portia sat motionless, staring at the papers she still held in her hands. Larkin shifted his perplexed gaze from me to his wife and back again, as if trying to make sense of what had happened. Maybe we should have a drink, I suggested, breaking the silence. I think we have champagne. Champagne? Portia raised her head, a dangerous glint in her eyes. Do you really think this is the moment for celebration? Not for a celebration, I replied calmly. for a serious conversation. Alcohol can sometimes help relieve tension. Tension? Portia jumped to her feet. You call that tension? You secretly bought my company. Let me take you out to dinner to celebrate my fake promotion, and now you're offering me a drink? Technically, I bought a controlling interest, not the whole company, I corrected. And your promotion wasn't fake. I had nothing to do with it. Larkin finally came out of his daze. Mom, he said quietly, but with obvious reproach. Why did you do it? Why didn't you tell me? I sighed. Larkin, it was a business transaction. I've been investing money for years, and when this opportunity came up, don't lie, Portia interrupted. It's not just a business deal. This is revenge. You did this to humiliate me. Portia, I looked her straight in the eye. If I wanted to humiliate you, I would have waited until Monday, when you would have heard the news with the rest of the company. I came here today to tell you in person, before the official announcement. How noble, she said. Larkin stood up and walked over to the bar. He took out a bottle of whiskey, poured himself 2 fingers, and drank it in one gulp. I'd never seen my son drink like that before. Larkin, I began. No, Mom. He held up his hand, stopping me. Give me a minute to process all this. I nodded silently. Portia sank back into her chair, looking suddenly exhausted. How could you even afford it? She asked after a moment. $2 million. Where did you get that kind of money? I've always been frugal, I replied. After your father died, I looked at Larkin, I got an insurance policy. I invested it in stocks, then real estate. Sold the country house 3 years ago for a good profit. Plus, my consulting practice makes a nice profit, too. And you've been pretending all this time, a poor pensioner? Portia looked at me with disbelief. I never pretended, I countered. I just didn't flaunt my financial situation. Unlike some people, I don't think a man's worth is determined by his bank account or his brand of clothing. Portia flared up. Is that a spiel against me again? It's a fact, I shrugged. You yourself have repeatedly commented on my closet, my lifestyle, my inability to live. You thought I was a failure just because I didn't brag about my accomplishments. Larkin poured more whiskey, this time for himself and his wife. Mother, he said, handing the glass to Portia. I realize that Portia can sometimes be harsh, but to buy her company, our company, Portia corrected her automatically. That seems excessive, Larkin finished, as if you'd been waiting for the moment. I didn't wait, I shook my head. It all happened so fast. After our last dinner, I overheard Portia talking about the problems at Syntax Solutions. Then I called Jonah, an old colleague of mine who now works as an investment consultant. He looked into the company and said that despite the financial difficulties, it had excellent technology potential. It was a good investment opportunity. And the fact that it was a Porsche company had no bearing on your decision? Larkin asked skeptically. I thought for a moment. Of course it did, I admitted honestly. I wouldn't have known about the situation if it hadn't been for your invitation to dinner. And yes, I was hurt by some of Portia's comments that evening, but the main reason was still a business decision. Portia took a swig of whiskey and grimaced. What now? She asked. Will you fire me? Are you going to take revenge for all my insults? No, I answered firmly. As I said, I'm not going to fire you. On the contrary, I want you to continue directing research projects. By all reports, you're really competent. By all reports? Portia grinned bitterly. What, were you testing me? I was researching the company before the investment, I explained. Your name was mentioned in several reports in a positive light, especially your work on a machine learning project for predictive analytics. Portia looked surprised that I knew such details. And you're really not going to fire me, even after... She glanced at the rag still on the table. Even after you called me a maid and threw a rag at me? I smiled. I don't mix personal and business, but there is a condition. What is it? She asked tensely. Total transparency in project management. No hiding of problems, no embellishing of results. Honest reports, even if the news is bad. Portia nodded slowly. I can work with that, she said discreetly. I've always been in favor of transparency. It's just that the previous management preferred a more optimistic presentation. I know, I nodded. That's why the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. Larkin seemed to be finally beginning to make sense of the situation. So you really saved Portia's company from going under? Yes, I confirmed. Without the emergency investment, Syntax Solutions would have gone bankrupt within 2 months. All employees, including Portia, would have lost their jobs. Portia looked like she'd been punched. 2 months? She whispered. We were told that the situation was difficult, but not catastrophic. A classic tactic of troubled companies, I explained, hiding the real state of affairs until the last minute, so as not to cause panic among employees and investors. Larkin approached his wife and put his hand on her shoulder. So Mom actually saved your career. Portia tensed, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. Perhaps, she admitted reluctantly. But why didn't you tell me right away? Why did you wait until tonight? The deal was closed only yesterday, I replied. And the official announcement is scheduled for Monday. I wanted you to hear it from me, not at a general meeting. But you didn't tell us when we invited you to dinner, Larkin pointed out. I had planned to tell you during dinner, I explained. But I wanted to choose the right moment. I didn't think it would turn out like this. We sat in silence for a while, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. Finally, Portia straightened up and looked at me with a new expression, a mixture of respect and wariness. You're full of surprises, Roxy, she said. I've clearly underestimated you. Most people underestimate women our age, I replied. We become almost invisible. That can be a disadvantage as well as an advantage. I'll keep that in mind. Portia nodded. Larkin still looked worried. What's going to happen on Monday? He asked. When the company finds out that you are now the owner. I will attend the general meeting with the CEO, I replied. He will introduce me as the new majority investor and chairman of the board. And about me being your daughter-in-law. Portia began. You don't have to disclose that, I said. Unless you don't want to. Portia thought for a moment. People will find out sooner or later anyway. With only 30 employees, rumors spread quickly. Then we'd better get ahead of the rumors, I suggested. We could mention our kinship right away to avoid the rumors later. Portia laughed, short and nervous. You know, just yesterday I thought you were a harmless old lady who didn't understand modern business. Today you're my boss, talking about corporate communications and rumor management. Life is full of surprises, I smiled. Larkin poured us all a glass of champagne, the same Veuve Clicquot I'd brought. To unexpected twists and turns, he said, raising his glass. We drank. Portia looked at me over the glass with a thoughtful expression. I need to prepare for Monday, she said. How should I behave? What should I say to my colleagues? Just be professional, I advised. No special changes are required. Just keep doing your job as usual. And our personal relationship? Portia put the glass down. Will they change? That's up to you, I replied. I've always treated you with respect, Portia, even when you didn't realize it. I hope that now we can build a relationship of mutual respect. She nodded slowly, but there was still doubt in her eyes. We separated shortly after that. I felt that Portia and Larkin needed time alone to discuss what had happened. When I left, Larkin walked me to my car. Mom, he said quietly, I'm still not sure you did the right thing. It seems like manipulative. I understand your doubts, I replied, looking my son in the eye. But believe me, my primary motive was a business decision. Syntax Solutions is a great company with a lot of potential. Portia working there was a coincidence that just brought the opportunity to my attention. But you could have told us earlier, he objected, before it was official. Maybe it was a mistake, I admitted. But the deal was moving so fast. And then I decided that a personal message would be better than a phone call. Larkin sighed. I just hope this doesn't completely ruin your relationship with Portia. They were already complicated. I hope so too, I said, hugging my son. Give her time. Portia is a smart woman. She will realize that there are positive aspects to this situation. When I got home, it was late. I sat in my living room reflecting on the events of the evening. Portia's reaction was expected. Shock, then anger, then a slow realization of the new reality. But what surprised me was her ability to adapt quickly. By the end of the evening, she was thinking about the practical aspects of the situation rather than just reacting emotionally. Perhaps she and I had more in common than it seemed at first glance. The next morning, I got a call from Jonah. How did your family expose go? He asked with undisguised curiosity. Dramatic, but generally better than I'd feared, I replied, summarizing the evening's events, leaving out the most personal details. Jonah said thoughtfully. So your sister-in-law didn't throw a tantrum and promise to quit in protest? No, I smiled, remembering. Portia is too pragmatic for such gestures. She quickly realized that giving up a good position because of wounded pride would be foolish. Smart girl, Jonah said with a chuckle. What about tomorrow's meeting? Are you ready for it? I think so, I answered, reviewing the notes I'd prepared over the weekend. I plan to keep it short and to the point. No big speeches or promises of revolutionary changes. That's the right approach, Jonah approved. People need stability, especially after a period of uncertainty. By the way, I hear that Syntax Solutions stock has already reacted to the news of the new investor, with a slight increase on the over-the-counter market. That's a good sign, I remarked. It means the market believes in the company's potential. After talking to Iona, I went through the documents I was going to present at tomorrow's meeting. The financial recovery plan, the product line development strategy, the cost optimization proposals. Everything looked good, but I realized that the real work would begin only after I officially took office. In the evening, I received a message from Larkin. Mom, Portia and I talked a lot. I still don't quite understand why you did what you did, but I recognize that you may have saved Portia's career and the future of the company. She'll be at the meeting tomorrow. I hope everything goes well. I replied briefly. Thank you, Larkin. I'll do everything I can to make Syntax Solutions thrive. And I'm glad you and Portia talked. Monday morning came clear and sunny. I had chosen a strict black suit with a white blouse for the big day, a classic option that spoke of seriousness but wasn't too pretentious. Arriving at the Syntax Solutions office a half hour before the appointed time, I met with Harrison Price and Ashley Donovan for final preparations. Price looked tense but tried to maintain a confident appearance. Mrs. Vandermeer, he said as he shook my hand, the team is looking forward to meeting you. I've prepared a brief presentation on the current state of the company. That won't be necessary, Mr. Price. I interrupted him gently. I have already thoroughly reviewed all aspects of the business. Today, I just want to introduce myself to the employees and briefly outline my vision for the future of Syntax Solutions. Sure, whatever you say, he nodded, slightly discouraged. Ashley approached with a folder of documents. Here are the updated financial statements you requested, Mrs. Vandermeer, and a list of all the current projects with who's responsible. Thank you, Ashley. I took the folder with a grateful smile. And please call me Roxy. At precisely 9:30, we entered the conference room, where all the company's employees were gathered, about 30 people of various ages, but mostly young. I immediately noticed Portia sitting in the second row with a perfectly straight back and a tense expression on her face. Price stepped up on a small platform and addressed the audience. Good morning, Syntax Solutions team. As you all know, the last few months have been challenging for our company. But today, I am happy to announce that we have found the perfect investor who will help us not only to overcome the current difficulties, but also to reach a new level of development. Let me introduce you to Roxy Vandermeer, our new majority shareholder and chairman of the board. I stepped up to the platform to polite but wary applause. As I looked at the faces of the employees, I saw a mixture of hope, skepticism, and curiosity. Portia was looking directly at me, her face impenetrable. Good morning, I began. First of all, I want to say that I invested in Syntax Solutions for a reason. I believe in the potential of your technology and in the abilities of each and every one of you. My goal is not radical change, but stability and sustainable growth. I paused, looking around the audience. In the interest of transparency, I continued, I feel I should disclose that I have a personal connection to the company. Portia Gallagher Vandermeer, your Deputy Director of Research, is my son's wife. A whisper ran through the room. Several people turned to Portia, who kept a stony expression on her face. I want to assure you all that this matter will not affect my business decisions, I added firmly. All employees of Syntax Solutions will be evaluated solely on their performance and contribution to the success of the company. Another whisper, this time with a hint of relief. And now briefly about the plans. I unfolded my notes. In the next 3 months, we will focus on financial stabilization and optimization of operational processes. No mass layoffs are planned. On the contrary, we will invest in the development of key technologies and expansion of our client base. After the meeting, many employees came up to introduce themselves personally. I tried to memorize each name and ask relevant questions about their work. Portia watched me from a distance, not getting closer, but not moving away either. When the bulk of the people had gone, she finally approached. "Interesting meeting," she said in a neutral tone. "You made a good impression." "Thank you," I replied. "How did your colleagues react to the news of our kinship?" Portia shrugged. "It varies. Some are jealous, thinking I have a special position now. Others worry that you might fire me because of personal differences." "What do you think of yourself?" I asked. She paused for a moment as if weighing her words. "I think I'm in a very strange situation," she said at last. "My mother-in-law, who I underestimated, is suddenly my boss. It's awkward to say the least." "I agree," I nodded. "But we're both adults and professionals. I'm sure we can find a way to work together." "Maybe," she met my gaze. "But I have to admit my pride has taken a serious hit." "Pride will heal," I said softly. "The important thing is that the company survives, and so will your career." Portia pressed her lips together. "I still can't decide whether to thank you or hate you," she admitted. "You can do both at the same time," I offered with a slight smile. "I wouldn't take offense." She laughed suddenly, briefly, and almost against her will. "You're really not the woman I thought you were, Roxy Vandermeer." "I hope it's a compliment," I replied. "I'm not sure yet." She turned to leave, but stopped. "I have a department meeting in 10 minutes. Would you like to attend, as chairman of the board?" I realized it was an olive branch, clumsy but sincere. "I'd love to," I replied. "Lead the way. I'm right behind you." It had been a week since I had officially taken over as chairman of the board of directors of Syntax Solutions. Every day I arrived at the office by 9 in the morning and left at 6 in the evening at the earliest, immersing myself in the company's business, meeting with employees, reviewing projects and financial documents. It was exhausting, but also incredibly stimulating. It was like I was 20 years back in the active phase of my career. On Friday, an important management meeting was scheduled, the first strategy meeting I chaired. I arrived at the office earlier than usual to prepare. The spacious conference room on the top floor of the building was already prepared. A long table with water bottles and notepads, a large screen for presentations. Ashley Donovan, CFO, entered first, carrying the traditional folder of documents and a clipboard. "Good morning, Roxy," she smiled. "We've developed a good working rapport over the past week." Ashley was proving to be a competent financier wedded to incompetent management. "Morning, Ashley," I nodded. "Ready for the battle tonight?" She grinned, understanding the metaphor. Harrison Price, still the CEO, had resisted most of the proposed changes. "Always," she replied, unfolding the documents. "I have prepared updated cash flow projections to take into account your restructuring plan. The numbers speak for themselves." Gradually, the room filled with department heads, director of technology, director of marketing, director of sales, all with a wary and expectant look on their faces. Portia came penultimate, looking impeccable in an austere navy blue suit. She nodded to me demurely, but without obvious hostility, and took a seat across from me. Over the past week, our interactions had been strictly professional. We exchanged information on projects, discussed technical details, but avoided any personal topics. The other employees seemed to have gotten used to our unusual relationship status and treated it as an amusing fact, nothing more. At exactly 10 o'clock, Harrison Price entered the room, impeccably dressed, with a perfect smile and impenetrable gaze. "Good morning, team," he said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "We have a busy agenda, so I suggest we get started without delay." I noted that he didn't address me directly, a small act of passive aggression that I decided to ignore for now. "The first item on the agenda is last quarter's financial results and the outlook for the current quarter," Price continued. "Ashley, please." Ashley began her presentation, showing graphs and tables with financial figures. The picture was disappointing. A sharp drop in revenues after the loss of a key client, rising expenses, declining profitability. However, the final slides prepared after my investment showed the prospects for recovery. As you can see, Ashley concluded, thanks to the capital injection, we have been able to stabilize, but structural changes are needed to achieve sustainable growth. Thank you, Ashley. Price nodded. Now for the marketing strategy. Jeremy, the marketing director, a young man with a fashionable beard, began his presentation, but I interrupted him gently. Before we get to marketing, I'd like to discuss the financial results in more detail. Price looked annoyed. We can come back to the financials later, but for now, I think the financials are the foundation of everything else, I said calmly but firmly. Jeremy, if I may? The marketing director nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. I opened my laptop and displayed my own presentation. Over the past week, I've done a detailed analysis of the company's financial flows over the past 2 years, I began, showing the first slide with a graph. As you can see, the problem started long before we lost Biomedica as a client. The cost structure became inefficient about 18 months ago. As I continued my presentation, detailing the weaknesses in the company's financial management, I noticed the facial expressions of those present changing. Disbelief was replaced by surprise, then interest. Price sat stony-faced. Portia listened attentively, taking notes. Expenses for corporate events and hospitality look particularly problematic. I displayed a detailed table on the screen. They've increased by 120% in the last year, while the return on that investment is not obvious. For example, the Las Vegas conference cost the company almost $100,000, but it didn't result in a single new deal. Price fidgeted in his chair. That conference was important to our image, he argued. We showed the market that Syntax Solutions is a serious player. Serious players don't spend money without return, I countered, especially when the company is teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. There was a tense silence in the room. I continued. My goal is not to criticize past decisions, but to learn from them. Therefore, I am proposing a financial restructuring plan that includes cutting unproductive costs, optimizing staffing levels, and reallocating resources to research and development. I moved on to the next slides, explaining each point of the plan in detail. When I finished, Ashley was the first to break the silence. This plan looks very thoughtful. I especially like the idea of redirecting funds from marketing activities to research projects. Our strength has always been technology, not PR. I'd like to disagree, Jeremy interjected. Marketing is critical to attracting new customers. I agree, I nodded. But effective marketing doesn't necessarily mean expensive conferences and full-page ads. Sometimes point efforts that target specific audiences work better. Gradually, the conversation turned into a lively discussion. I noticed that Portia was listening intently, but not actively participating. Finally, when the discussion turned to research projects, she raised her hand. If I may, I would like to speak on the allocation of resources among the projects. Of course, Portia, I nodded. Your opinion is especially valuable in this matter. She straightened up and began to speak, clearly, professionally, with a deep knowledge of the subject. Portia explained the potential of each research area, the risks involved, and the expected return on investment. In particular, the project on machine learning for predictive analytics has already attracted the attention of 2 potential clients, she concluded. But we need additional funding to bring it to the commercial stage. I listened intently, noting Portia's technical expertise. It wasn't empty corporate jargon, but a deep understanding of the subject. How much additional funds are required? I asked. We estimate about $300,000 for the next 6 months, she replied. That will allow us to hire 2 more developers and purchase the necessary equipment. I made a note in my notebook. That sounds reasonable. I think we can find those funds if we reallocate the budget according to the proposed plan. Portia looked surprised at my quick agreement. Price frowned. We can't just rearrange the budget. There are approved plans, commitments, which brought the company to the brink of bankruptcy, I reminded him gently. Harrison, I understand your concern. But as a majority shareholder, I have the right and obligation to make decisions that I believe are best for the company. Price pressed his lips together but remained silent. The meeting continued, and we discussed several other important issues. including our strategy for attracting new customers and our plans for product line development. By the end of the meeting, several key decisions were made. A financial restructuring plan was approved. Resources were reallocated in favor of promising research projects, and a working group was formed to find new clients. When the meeting was over and people began to leave, I noticed that Portia was lingering, gathering her papers more slowly than usual. When it was just the two of us, she looked up. "Can I talk to you unofficially?" "Sure," I nodded, closing my laptop. "Here, or do you prefer another place?" "Maybe the cafe on the first floor?" she suggested. "There shouldn't be many people there right now." We went down to a small cafe in the lobby of the building. Portia got an espresso, I got a green tea. We sat down at a table in the far corner, away from the other customers. "I wanted to say," Portia began after a pause, "that your analysis of the company's financial situation was impressive. I didn't expect that level of detail and insight." "Thank you," I smiled. Finance had always been my forte. Even when I worked as a controller, I was most interested in the strategic aspects. "You've never talked about your career," she said. "What you've done." "You never asked," I replied simply. Portia stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Yes, that's true. Yeah. I made assumptions based on my prejudices." "We all do that sometimes," I said, not wanting to add to her guilt. "But I was particularly arrogant," she looked me in the eye, "and rude, especially that night with the rag. I want to apologize for that." "Apology accepted," I nodded, though I must admit, your reaction at the time gave me a certain satisfaction. Portia smiled slightly. "I can imagine. It was almost like a movie, the perfect moment of exposure." "Not exactly what I had planned," I admitted. "But yeah, it was pretty dramatic." We were silent for a moment, each absorbed in her own thoughts. "May I ask you a direct question?" Portia finally asked. "Of course." "Did you buy Syntax Solutions just because of the business potential, or was it partly to revenge for my treatment of you?" I pondered, deciding that absolute honesty was more important than diplomacy at this point. "Both," I answered. "The main motive was business. I really saw potential in the company, especially in the technologies you were developing. But yes, there was also a personal component. Not so much revenge, but a desire to prove that I shouldn't be written off because of my age or conservative style of dress." Portia nodded, accepting the answer. "Fair enough. And to be honest, you've really taught me a lesson. I've always prided myself on not judging people based on looks or gender, on fighting stereotypes. But in doing so, I've stereotyped you as the typical outdated mother-in-law." "Prejudices come in many forms," I said. "And sometimes the most insidious ones are the ones we don't realize." "Yeah," she took a sip of coffee. "You know, I still haven't gotten used to the idea that you're my boss. It's a strange feeling, mixing professional and personal." "For me too," I admitted. "But I think we can find the right balance. A strictly business relationship at work and a family relationship outside of work. It may not be easy," Portia said. "No doubt. But I believe we're both smart and professional enough to pull it off." Portia looked at me with a new expression, a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Do you know that you have created a sensation among the staff?" she said with a slight smile. "All everyone talks about is the cool new bossy girl who took the finances apart." I laughed. I hadn't expected that reaction. I was just doing my job. "And doing it well," Portia finished her coffee, "which, by the way, makes me wonder about my own effectiveness. I always thought I was indispensable, but now I realize I can do more for the company." "You're very valuable," I said seriously. "Your presentation today on research projects was brilliant. I saw the others listening to you with genuine interest." "Thank you." She blushed slightly at the praise. "This is really an area I feel confident in." "And it shows," I smiled. "You know, I think we could work well together, you and I. You have the technical expertise, I have the financial and management expertise. Together we could do a lot for Syntax Solutions." Portia looked surprised by this suggestion. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely," I nodded. "I'm not going to run the company alone. I need competent people I can trust. And despite our personal differences in the past, I can see that you really know your stuff." She hesitated, tapping her fingers on the table. This is unexpected, but intriguing. What exactly are you proposing? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Maybe we could work together on a strategy for the development of the technological direction, or your more active participation in making management decisions. Let's think about that in the coming weeks. Portia nodded. Good. I'm open to discussion. We ended our conversation and returned to the office. Before we went to our desks, Portia paused. Roxy, Larkin asked if you'd like to come over for dinner on Sunday. No formal occasion, just a family get-together. I'd love to, I replied. On Sunday, I stood in front of my son and daughter-in-law's house again, but this time with a completely different feeling. Instead of my usual wariness, I was quietly curious about what our relationship would be like now, after all that had happened. Larkin opened the door with a smile that seemed more relaxed than in recent weeks. Mom, he hugged me. I'm glad you came. I'm glad too, I replied sincerely. In the living room, Portia was arranging glasses for an aperitif. She was dressed simpler than usual, jeans and a loose blouse instead of her usual designer outfits. Roxy, she nodded. Welcome. I noticed that there were new details in the room. A few family photos on the shelves, including one of Larkin with me at my college graduation. Thanks for the invitation, I said, holding out a bottle of wine, a simple but good red this time. I hope it will go well with dinner. Perfect. Portia took the bottle, studying the label with an interested look rather than her usual condescension. I've cooked steaks. This wine will be the perfect accompaniment. Larkin looked surprisingly happy as he watched our polite exchange of remarks. How are things going at the company? He asked, pouring wine into glasses. Slowly but surely, I replied. It's a lot of work, but there's progress. Your mother is revolutionizing, Portia added with a slight smile. She's shaking up outdated processes, making people think in new ways. Don't exaggerate, I shook my head. I'm just trying to clean up finances and processes. And you're doing it quite effectively, Portia raised her glass. To new beginnings? We clinked glasses. Larkin looked at us with an expression of incredulous happiness, as if he couldn't believe that the two most important women in his life had finally found common ground. I'm so glad you... He hesitated for words. Not trying to kill each other? Portia suggested ironically. We all laughed, and the tension that still hung in the air eased considerably. Over dinner, we talked about work, about future plans, even broached the subject of possible family expansion, a topic Portia had categorically avoided before. We're thinking maybe in a year or two, she said, glancing at Larkin. When the company has stabilized and my career is more certain. That sounds reasonable, I nodded. Planning is important. Exactly, Portia agreed. I've always appreciated a good strategy, in business or in life. As we finished dinner and moved on to dessert, a homemade apple pie, which Portia, to my surprise, had baked herself, I realized that our relationship had really changed. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale reconciliation. There were still differences in our views and approaches to life. But there was a mutual respect that had been missing before. Larkin seemed happier than I'd seen him in years. He no longer tried to be a buffer between us, no longer tried to anticipate and smooth over potential conflicts. Instead, he freely participated in the conversation, voicing his own opinions without fear of his wife's or his mother's reaction. When I was about to leave, Portia walked me to the door while Larkin cleared the table. It was nice, she said, and I realized it was a sincere acknowledgement. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, I replied. And for the pie. It was really good. My grandmother's recipe, she smiled slightly. Maybe next time you could show me how you make yours? Larkin always says your apple pie is the best in the world. The offer, a small gesture but significant in the context of our past relationship, touched me. I'd love to, I said. We didn't hug goodbye. We hadn't yet reached that level of intimacy. But Portia held out her hand, and I shook it, firmly, like a business partner, but with a warmth that spoke of something more. As I drove home, I thought about the strange turn of events that had brought us to this moment. The controlling interest in Syntax Solutions was not only a good investment for me, but also a catalyst for change in our family relationship. There was still a lot of work ahead, both in the company and in building a really good relationship with my daughter-in-law. But now we had a foundation of mutual respect on which to build. And the rag thrown in her face was now just a funny family story that we might be telling with laughter many years from now.